Imagine, for a second, that you're trying to solve a giant jigsaw puzzle. But there's a major catch. You're not actually allowed to look at the pieces. And to make matters even crazier, imagine this puzzle is literally smaller than a single microscopic cell. It's so unbelievably tiny that no ordinary microscope on Earth is going to help you see its shape. You know the pieces are there, you know they're super important, but they are completely 100% invisible to the naked eye. Well, believe it or not, this was the exact incredibly frustrating reality for the scientific community for decades. They were surrounded by the most vital molecules of life, but they were basically operating completely in the dark. So, that brings us to the core mystery of our explainer today. How exactly do you solve an invisible puzzle? For decades, brilliant scientists struggled endlessly with this. They knew what these vital molecules did, but because they couldn't see their exact 3D shapes, they just couldn't unlock their full potential. It was this massive, seemingly impossible roadblock in chemistry and medicine. That is, until one absolutely extraordinary woman found a way to, quite literally, illuminate the invisible. Her name was Dorothy Hodgkin, and her discoveries, well, they would go on to transform modern medicine forever. Section 1. Who was Dorothy Hodgkin? Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp her groundbreaking discoveries, we've got to understand the brilliant mind behind them. Dorothy Hodgkin's story kicks off in 1910 in Cairo, Egypt, where she was born while her British parents were working abroad. And right from the start, it was pretty clear she saw the world a little differently. You know, while most kids were busy with toys or collecting stamps, Dorothy developed this deep, incredibly unique fascination with chemistry. She just loved studying crystals and chemicals. It wasn't just a phase either. It became her life's calling. She took this obsession all the way to adulthood, studying at the prestigious University of Oxford, completely dedicating her life to mapping that invisible molecular world we were just talking about. And we absolutely have to remember the context here. She was doing all of this in an era when there were very, very few female scientists. But her sheer determination, her insatiable curiosity, it set her entirely apart from the pack. Section 2. Mastering the shadows. Now, having the curiosity is one thing, right? But to solve an invisible puzzle, you need a very specific superpower. The biggest challenge for chemists wasn't finding the molecules, it was actually seeing their exact three-dimensional shape. Since these molecules are way too small to just look at directly, Dorothy had to master this highly complex, mind-bending technique called X-ray crystallography. Basically, it's a method used to determine molecular structure by analyzing scattered X-ray patterns. Let me tell you, it wasn't as simple as just peering through a lens. This process was insanely difficult. We're talking years of careful, painstaking math to figure out what those X-rays were actually showing. But Dorothy, she didn't back down from the math or the complexity for a second. Instead, she became one of the absolute greatest experts in the world at it. And this brilliantly illustrates how the technique actually works in practice. First up, scientists shine X-rays directly through a crystal made from a specific substance. Next, as those X-rays pass through, they scatter and bounce off the atoms inside, which creates these very specific, intricate patterns. Finally, in step 3, scientists analyze those scattered patterns to locate exactly where every single atom is positioned. Think of it kind of like this. It's like trying to figure out the exact shape and size of an object, strictly by studying the shadow it casts on the wall. By mapping out these molecular shadows, Dorothy Hodgkin began piecing together the very building blocks of life. Section 3. Revealing medical marvels. Armed with this total superpower of X-ray crystallography, Dorothy was ready to take on some of the biggest problems in human health. One of her very first major world-changing victories was unlocking the structure of penicillin. Now, back then, penicillin was already out there being used. It was already saving countless lives by fighting off dangerous bacterial infections. People were literally calling it a miracle drug. But there was a catch. Scientists didn't actually fully understand its molecular structure. It was kind of like driving a state-of-the-art sports car without having any clue how the engine actually works under the hood. Hodgkin's meticulous work completely mapped out penicillin. By revealing its exact structure, she gave researchers the blueprint they needed to understand exactly how the antibiotic worked, and more importantly, how to improve it and synthesize even better versions. While her work on penicillin was an absolute game changer for fighting bacterial infections, her next massive hurdle was a totally different beast, vitamin B12. At the time, vitamin B12 was considered one of the most complex molecules ever studied. I mean, it was an absolute behemoth of a molecular puzzle. But guess what? She solved it. By decoding the incredibly intricate structure of vitamin B12, She provided the exact breakthrough scientists needed to finally understand and treat serious diseases caused by a deficiency of this essential vitamin. She was just systematically knocking down the absolute biggest mysteries in medicine one by one.
Section 4. The Ultimate Insulin Challenge.
But even penicillin and vitamin B12 were really just warm-up acts for what would become the ultimate boss battle of her scientific career. Insulin. Scientists all over the world had tried to figure out its structure for decades with absolutely zero success. Now, I want you to really focus on the number 30. That is how many years Dorothy Hodgkin spent working on the insulin problem alone. Let that sink in for a second. More than 3 decades completely dedicated to one single, mind-bogglingly complex molecular structure. It's honestly hard to even wrap your head around that level of extreme patience and focus. While a lot of other folks might have just thrown in the towel and moved on to easier projects after 5 or 10 years, she stayed the course, calculating, refining, and analyzing those scattered X-ray patterns year after year after year. So the crucial point is, when those 30 long years of patience finally paid off in 1969, she successfully revealed insulin's 3-dimensional structure. And guys, this wasn't just a personal win for Dorothy. This was an earth-shattering milestone for medicine. Because once researchers finally understood insulin's exact layout, it opened up entirely new worlds of possibility. It directly helped researchers drastically improve treatments for diabetes and fundamentally changed how medical science approached developing better, more effective medicines for the condition. Section 5. A Nobel Legacy. With achievements like penicillin, vitamin B12, and insulin on her resume, her groundbreaking work was universally recognized. For her extraordinary, unmatched ability to determine the structures of these complex molecules, Dorothy Hodgkin was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1964. This completely cemented her place in scientific history. And it's incredibly noteworthy here, she became only the 3rd woman ever to receive the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. The Nobel Committee clearly recognized that her work wasn't just some niche technical trick. It had enormous sweeping importance across chemistry, biology, and medicine. When we look at her lasting impact today, it honestly reads like a checklist of modern medical miracles. Because of her work, we've seen massive advances in antibiotic research, diabetes treatment, nutrition, and really the entire framework of modern drug development. Her discoveries literally continue to shape pharmaceutical research to this very day. But, it's also worth pointing out that beyond the brilliant science, her legacy is deeply personal. Among her colleagues and students, she was universally known for her incredible kindness, her humility, and a fierce, fierce dedication to mentoring young scientists. She was truly as great a teacher as she was a researcher. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it sums up her entire philosophy. The simple but powerful idea that understanding the smallest building blocks of life could lead to some of the biggest breakthroughs in human health. By proving that patience, precision, and relentless persistence could unlock nature's best-kept secrets, she showed us all something profound. She showed the world that by focusing intensely on the microscopic, we can create massive, world-changing, macroscopic impacts that improve millions and millions of lives. So the next time you hear about antibiotics, or maybe someone taking insulin to manage their diabetes, I want you to remember the incredibly dedicated scientist who spent decades of her life uncovering those invisible shapes. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to end on today. If Dorothy Hodgkin could completely revolutionize modern medicine just by finally seeing the invisible structures of the past, what other invisible puzzles are out there right now just waiting to be solved to unlock the very next medical breakthrough? The building blocks of tomorrow's cures are definitely out there, just waiting for the next curious mind to shed light on their shadows.